Not everyone was a fan of Ed Sullivan, the famed TV anchor, despite his reputation for unearthing stars. Sullivan openly despised one singer in particular who became his adversary. Why did these two become so antagonistic? Come along as we discover the events that define their historic dispute by delving into the strained relationship between Sullivan and this singer. A native of Harlem, New York, Edward James Sullivan came into this world on September 28, 1901. He came from a musical family in Port Chester, New York, though he was born in Monterey Park, California. As a family, they enjoyed listening to phonograph records, singing, and playing the piano. Sullivan developed a passion for the performing arts as a result. Sullivan stood out as a gifted athlete while attending Port Chester High School. He was a 12-year letter winner on the football team as a halfback, a guard on the basketball court, and a track and field sprinter. Additionally, he was an accomplished baseball player who won multiple titles while serving as both catcher and team captain. He gained the ability to think progressively about the topic of race from his experiences with the integrated sports teams of New York and Connecticut. Following his final year of high school, Sullivan found work as a sports reporter for the Port Chester Daily Item. He had a brief stint at the Hartford Post before joining the staff of the New York Evening Mail and covering sports there. Sullivan worked his way up the ladder after starting out at the Evening Mail, holding various roles at the Associated Press, the Philadelphia Bulletin, the Morning World, the Morning Telegraph, the New York Bulletin, and finally the Post of Leader when the paper shut down in 1923. He began writing about athletics for the New York Evening Graphic in 1927, and quickly rose through the ranks to become the sports editor. In 1929, Sullivan succeeded Walter Winchell as the Graphic's Broadway columnist, which boosted his career. After that, he moved on to the New York Daily News, where he wrote a column about Broadway shows titled Little Old New York. During this period, Sullivan was both a writer and an actor in the 1933 picture Mr. Broadway, and he also supplied entertainment news to the radio. In addition, he showed clubgoers about New York and introduced them to famous actors and singers. Toast of the Town, a weekly CBS variety show that Sullivan was persuaded to host by Marlowe Lewis in 1948, aired on Sunday nights. Although reviewers and viewers were not fond of the show at first, it eventually became a hit and was rebranded as The Ed Sullivan Show. Ed Sullivan's eccentric screen presence, which benefited from his lack of acting chops and carefree attitude. The fact that he could put on shows showcasing vaudevillians, comedians, singers, and theater talents was something even his detractors conceded. Due to its emphasis on up-and-coming performers, The Ed Sullivan Show ranks high among the most-watched television programs in the United States. Sullivan rose to prominence in the entertainment industry as a result of his natural gift for discovering and signing talent and his refreshingly straightforward presentation of actors and actresses. Viewers loved the show and considered it a cultural touchstone because of his ability to bring top performers straight to their living rooms. Great performances captivated the nation, and the Ed Sullivan program began to gain up steam about this time, keeping viewers riveted. On the other hand, Elvis Presley's performance on September 9, 1956, was one of the most landmark shows in the program's history. Sullivan was hesitant to feature Elvis Presley at first because of his image as a rebel. Regardless of these reservations, Presley's performance was a smashing success, drawing in an unprecedented 60 million viewers. With 7 million viewers, the final performance was a watershed moment in television history, featuring unforgettable moments such as remarkable goals, dramatic mistakes, astute trickery, and magnificent saves. As a result of this performance, The Ed Sullivan Show became a crucial platform for up-and-coming artists to demonstrate their skills on national television. Seeing the Beatles perform live in America was yet another momentous occasion. On February 9, 1964, the very day the British invasion of the United States of America began, they made their debut appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. With an audience size of 73 million, this program reached 34% of all American adults and was one of the most watched television shows of all time. An already popular show became even more so after the Beatles' appearance, which solidified Sullivan's reputation as the show's talent discoverer and sparked a cultural revolution. In addition to Elvis and the Beatles, the Ed Sullivan Show included numerous other legendary performers. The evening was a potpourri of fame and passion thanks to the performances of famous musicians including Janis Joplin, the Rolling Stones, and the Supremes. At last, it hit Sullivan the key to the Jubilee Show's success was displaying a wide range of skills and mastering their presentation. It was none other than Buddy Holly, the singer, who became Ed Sullivan's mortal enemy. In the 1950s, Holly became popular as a musician. She is often regarded as the pioneer of rock and roll. Charles Hardin Holly, better known as Buddy Holly, was born on September 7, 1936 in Lubbock, Texas, into a musical family that favored gospel and country music. When Holly was a kid, he could play the piano and guitar. By the time he was a teenager, he was heavily involved in local bands. He decided to switch to rock roll after his big break in 1955, when he was asked to open for Elvis Presley. When Holly, Nicky Sullivan, Joe B. Malden, and Jerry Allison formed the Crickets in 1957, it was the beginning of his professional career. As a result of That'll Be the Day's success, the band went on to become nationally popular and even top the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Holly brought a fresh sound to music by combining rockabilly with rhythm and blues. Despite the unfortunate end to his life at a young age and the brief duration of his singing and playing career, Holly made an impression on rock music. He became a fan favorite very fast thanks to his exciting performance style and mesmerizing charisma. Holly and Sullivan's relationship was rocky and full of misunderstandings, even if Sullivan was becoming more popular. On December 1, 1957, young Buddy Holly made his television debut on The Ed Sullivan Show with a performance by his Cricket Band. Performing their popular song That'll Be the Day, Holly and his band had an initial successful performance. However, on January 26, 1958, at the subsequent performance, issues began to arise. Sullivan requested that he replace Oh Boy with a less energetic song, according to Holly, because the excitement could be too much for the show's audience. On the other hand, Holly turned down the request and continued with his plan to sing Oh Boy. Here is when their artistic differences began to manifest as a conflict of interest. Even when they weren't performing together, Sullivan and Holly were unable to tolerate one another. Because Holly was so defiant and intent on striking out on her own, she proved too much for Sullivan, who was picky about the shows he featured. This was made clear by the divergent ideas that the two characters had about how the performance should go. Sullivan wanted Stone to be quieter and more collected, but Holly was adamant about preserving the charisma that drew in the crowds. Viewers could feel Sullivan's discontent with Holly as he performed on the January 1958 show. From the perspective of the majority, Sullivan's subsequent introduction of him as Holly Sullivan was an obvious display of disdain. Technical difficulties also detracted from the performance. For example, Holly's guitar microphone was off, which is unusual for an event of this caliber. Regardless, Holly with the Crickets still managed to put up a fantastic performance for the crowd. Despite the fact that the stage tension was palpable, the national conversation revolved around the on-air dispute in no time. News outlets and entertainment magazines covered the incident extensively. Some technical issues and Sullivan's apparent discomfort have sparked speculation. Rock roll's immorality and the television host's morals clashed, leading to this rivalry, which was fueled by the mainstream media. Many articles drew attention to the difference between Sullivan's more conventional type of entertainment and Holly's more experimental rock and roll. The effect of the conflict on the future of music and television was the subject of much discussion in articles and opinion pieces, with some writers taking Sullivan's side and wanting control and others defending Holly's need for creative freedom. Both Holly's musical career and the Sullivan program were affected in various ways by this competition. The case centered on the Ed Sullivan Show and how the hosts were abusive and dictatorial towards the guests and performers, particularly those from rock and roll bands. Nonetheless, the show's coverage of so many acts, along with Sullivan's established persona, led to a period of rapid expansion. But Buddy Holly's reputation is more complicated than simple because of the spat with Sullivan. On the one hand, Holly was able to bolster his reputation as an independent, rebellious artist who could connect with the expanding rock and roll fan base thanks to this episode. By standing firm in his defiance of Sullivan's demands, Buddy Holly cemented his status as more than simply a musical outcast. He was portrayed as a criminal. This disobedience appealed to younger audiences that were ready for a sea shift in the music business, which in turn increased his fame. On the other hand, Holly missed out on future appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show because of this. No performer in the 60s could have imagined performing on such a grand platform. Because of this, he was unable to make an appearance on a nationally acclaimed television program. The notorious event was just the beginning of Sullivan and Holly's public feud. Sullivan was reportedly seen or heard making sexist remarks about Holly in later interviews, and he questioned his competence as a TV professional. As a result, Holly let Sullivan know how much he disliked his dictatorial nature and his contempt for original thought. Consequently, the feud between Ed Sullivan and Buddy Holly was a major cultural event of that era due to the intense animosity that unfolded on camera, the widespread publicity it received both before and after the show, and the impact it had on both their careers. It was a cultural clash between the old and new ways of viewing entertainment, and it significantly influenced the development of both music and television. Both Sullivan and Holly became legendary thanks to the never-ending verbal feud that kept them in the public eye. As rock roll challenged established entertainment standards in the late 1950s, it reflected the cultural change happening in the United States at the time. Mixed but noteworthy was the audience's reaction to the conflict. For challenging Sullivan's authoritarian style, Buddy Holly was revered as a hero by his admirers, especially the younger generation of rock and roll fans. Sullivan's devoted following was bolstered by Holly's defiance of Sullivan's demands, which chimed with the era's inherent discontent. A clear indication of this support was the fact that Holly's music persisted and even flourished in the face of the controversy. The rivalry heightened the drama and unpredictability for Ed Sullivan Show viewers. Some longtime viewers were faithful to Sullivan and respected his attempts to keep the show at a specific level. On the other hand, some people found Holly and other renegade artists fascinating, and they regarded the fight as a representation of the cultural change happening in America. The ratings impact of the feud was complex. Although the dispute garnered media attention and perhaps piqued viewers' interest in its aftermath, it also served to emphasize the disparity between generations and cultures. American television viewers continued to tune in to Sullivan's show, but the Holly incident highlighted the escalating conflict between more conventional entertainment ideals and the emerging rock and roll movement. A string of cutting remarks and deeds kept the public focused on the dispute between Ed Sullivan and Buddy Holly, which escalated in the public glare. By adding fuel to the fire of the dispute, the audience's reaction mirrored the larger cultural upheavals occurring at the same time inside the entertainment business. The rivalry between Ed Sullivan and Buddy Holly remained an important aspect of Sullivan's career history. Nevertheless, their historic feud remained a hot subject in the entertainment industry even after Holly's tragic death in an airplane crash on February 3, 1959, only a year after it occurred. Even though Sullivan's show featured a wide variety of performers during the 1960s, his encounter with Holly highlighted his dictatorial style. Nothing changed in Sullivan's approach to artists, even as he neared the end of his career. He was quite controlling over the content that the performers showcased on his show and insisted that all acts be suitable for families. Conflicts with other artists did arise as a result of this control, but none were as infamous or destructive as the one involving Holly. When Jim Morrison refused to change the line "We couldn't get much higher" from "Light My Fire" and performed the original lyrics, the Doors were excluded from the show. Sullivan had requested that Morrison remove the line. The same thing happened to Bo Diddley when he sang a song that he had written instead of the one that Sullivan had authorized. He was blacklisted. Since Buddy Holly passed away shortly after the disagreement between Ed Sullivan and him, there were no efforts to make amends. Sullivan seems to have gradually changed his mind on rock and roll, though only little. Recognizing the indisputable cultural importance and widespread appeal of rock roll, he persisted in featuring its artists on his program. Performers such as the Supremes and the Rolling Stones graced the Ed Sullivan Show, drawing in a younger demographic and ensuring the show's continued relevance in the ever-changing world of entertainment. Sullivan rarely went into detail about the encounter with Holly in his interviews and public speeches, but he did talk about his career and his experience working with many musicians. Lastly, despite his acknowledgement of Holly's talents, it was clear that their personal quarrel had an impact on his career. Sullivan made small adjustments to his methods even when managing these performers. On the one hand, he was unwavering in his support for the show's principles, but he was also willing to let go of the reins occasionally in order to explore fresh ideas when the audience's taste changed. As a whole, The Ed Sullivan Show had a significant impact on American culture when it was airing. It bridged generational gaps and genres, bringing rock roll back to its pop roots in the United States, which was a major part of its impact on young culture. Musical groups, classical orchestras, rock bands, comedians, puppeteers, and anybody else felt like performing were all part of the standard American variety program. Desegregation on television was aided by Sullivan's progressive stance of including the African American entertainers, even if advertisers and some viewers were uneasy about it. Featuring performances by artists such as the Jackson 5, Stevie Wonder, and the Temptations, this black-oriented program was a step in the direction of more inclusive American media. Guests like Stevie Wonder, Nat King Cole, and the Jackson 5 helped break down racial barriers in television. These performers were able to gain national recognition on Sullivan's platform, which helped bring American media closer to other cultures. Airing for a total of 23 years, from 1948 to 1971, The Ed Sullivan Show was a true television classic. It began a slow but steady decline in the late 1960s as a result of changing television habits and more competition. The audience, however, gradually lost interest in the program as a result of its inability to carve out a distinct niche in an ever-changing entertainment landscape. As a result of CBS's Rural Purge campaign, which included repositioning the weekly program, The Ed Sullivan Show was finally canceled in 1971. After more than 20 years of Sunday labor, Sullivan was removed from the airwaves in 1971. After the show's cancellation, Sullivan kept busy in the entertainment world. He continued to be actively involved in other CBS productions and performed anniversary shows. In the early 1970s, his health began to decline, and in September 1974, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. At the age of 73, he passed away on October 13, 1974. His impact endured long after his tenure on television ended. Ed Sullivan's influence on the entertainment world is undeniable, even after all these years after his passing. He pioneered the concept of combining musical performances, comedic sketches, and other forms of entertainment into a single television broadcast with his variety show. One of the most beloved shows of all time, The Ed Sullivan Show introduced audiences to a wide variety of performers. This man revolutionized variety shows and talent shows, and his legacy lives on in the performers that came after him. One of the most pivotal moments in show business history was the feud with the singer. Significant cultural impact, long-running influence, and enduring influence on the entertainment business define Ed Sullivan's legacy.